Hi everyone, now we are here with Razeen Sally. He was actually a previous economics professor based in the UK, but now he's a full-time author who actually just published a wonderful book about his travels in Sri Lanka, documented for the past 15 years. And we just went into the bookshop to look for a book and it's sold out. So Razeen, what was the process like writing this book over the last decade or a little more than that?
Yes, so I was, in my past life, I was an academic, a professor,
Right.
and I wrote academic books. So when I started coming back to Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
almost 20 years ago, and wanted to write a book about Sri Lanka, to get to know the country better,
Yeah.
I didn't want to write an academic book or a policy book about Sri Lanka. I've long been a fan of travel writing, so I decided, especially given my personal connection
Yeah.
with Sri Lanka, being half Sri Lankan, that I would write a travel book about the country.
Okay.
So I did a lot of traveling over 15 years now, about 30,000 or more kilometers,
Wow.
crisscrossing the island, and did a lot of research, particularly on Sri Lankan history,
All right.
and of course the writing process, which was long and slow and difficult, because writing like a writer is very different to writing like an academic.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that process from scratch and refine it through trial and error.
All right. Well, I feel like you writing about your travels in Sri Lanka makes us realize how much we take for granted walking down these streets. Even when we travel within Sri Lanka, we don't really remember to capture everything as beautifully as it is. It passes our eye very casually. Do you think your book actually sets that message for everyone in Sri Lanka?
Yes, maybe not explicitly, but
Okay.
what I found after the book was published was, or what I realized perhaps more acutely,
Okay.
was that after the book was published, I realized that most Sri Lankans have seen very little of their country.
Yes.
They, as you said, you're very right there, they tend to take it for granted. And even those who go out of Colombo outstation, and I've seen how they travel,
Yeah.
they, if you like, they live in a kind of elongated bubble. So they have their Colombo bubbles,
Right.
and often they don't, of course, see other parts of Colombo
Yeah.
that are maybe uncomfortable for them. But when they go outstation, they will, I mean, we're talking about people with some money.
Yeah.
They will stay at a nice hotel in Bentota or in Galle,
And they miss
or
the
it could be
entire
Kandy
thing.
and Norelia, and maybe do a familiar site, but that's it.
Yeah.
They're not, I mean, this country is so rich in its variety. There are still lots of back or beyond places. There's still a different Sri Lanka out there, or different Sri Lankas out there, because so many of them are so different from each other.
Agreed.
But Sri Lankans take it for granted. You know, just as we take our beaches for granted and litter our beaches, which
Yeah.
are some of the best in the world, we do that with the whole countries to some extent. No, Sri Lankans are not exceptional in that. I've seen that in other countries.
Yeah.
But given the richness of what we have, it's such a shame and such a waste.
Absolutely, yeah. And as someone who's traveled more than 30,000 kilometers, what do you have to say about your maybe favorite nook in Sri Lanka? What's your favorite part
Well,
about it?
I don't think I can pick out one because there are so many. So maybe I'll just pick out a few.
Okay.
My father hailed from Badulla in
Okay.
Uva.
Wow.
So I have a special fondness for that part of the tea country, for the Uva Hills, because that's where my father grew up, that's where I spent my childhood holidays. So I keep going back to that part of the country. I love going to Aranyas in the jungle, so forest hermitages. I mean,
Okay.
I have a special interest in Buddhism in Sri Lanka
Okay.
and meditation. And while there are still plenty of temples in urban areas that are definitely worth visiting, my favorite places of Buddhism in Sri Lanka are these forest hermitages, some of them in the jungle, remote, very quiet, very peaceful, with forest monks, with wildlife all around, and with a very different rhythm to life. So one example of that is Kudumbigala, which is just before you go into Kumana National Park from Arugambe. The nearest village to it is called Panama. That's just one example of many. So those are, well, two of my favorite places in Sri Lanka.
Okay, that's lovely to hear. Makes me realize how much I haven't traveled being here. Well, how is you, taking a step back from your book maybe, how has, obviously it's not your first time here, but how has your experience been at the Literary and Arts Festival here?
Very good. So it's, I mean, I'm happy that there is now an annual Literary and Arts Festival in Colombo, because it would be a shame if it were just in Gaul.
Oh yeah.
And I hope this one will be even more accessible to ordinary folk
Oh yeah.
than it has been in the I mean, it's still, it's not cheap for ordinary Sri Lankans.
It's not, yeah.
So, and that's a matter of funding. So, I mean, what is happening here is wonderful. It's great fun.
Yes.
It's great to see young people here,
But
including
hopefully
students.
Yeah.
Some of them in uniforms yesterday.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see much more of that, and more more
Accessibility.
participation, more accessibility.
Yeah.
And it's good to see that this combination of literature in there and art spaces and music spaces surrounding it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
All right.